And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons. Genesis 3 verse 7. And the eyes of them both were opened. Not of their bodies, but of their minds, not so as to have an advanced knowledge of things pleasant, profitable, and useful, as was promised and expected, but of things very disagreeable and distressing. Their eyes were opened to see that they had been deceived by the serpent, that they had broke the commandment of God, and incurred the displeasure of their Creator and kind benefactor, and had brought ruin and destruction upon themselves. They saw what blessings and privileges they had lost, communion with God, the dominion of the creatures, the purity and holiness of their nature, and what miseries they had involved themselves and their posterity in, how exposed they were to the wrath of God, the curse of the law, and to eternal death. And they knew that they were naked. They must know before that they were naked in their bodies, but they did not perceive that their nakedness was at all uncomely, or any disadvantage to them, but now they were sensible of both, that whereas they could look upon it before, and not blush or feel any sinful emotions in them, now they could not behold it without shame, and without finding evil concupiscence arising in them, and it being now the cool of the day, and their spirits also seized with fear of the divine displeasure, they might feel a shivering all over them, and wanted something to cover them, but more especially this may respect the nakedness of their souls they were now conscious of, being stripped of that honor and glory, privileges, and power, they were vested with, and having lost the image of God that was upon them, and that robe of purity, innocence, and righteousness, the rectitude of their nature, with which they were arrayed, and finding themselves naked and defenseless, and unable to screen themselves from the curses of a righteous law, and the fury of vindictive justice. And they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons. Not to cover their whole bodies, but only those parts which, ever since, mankind have been ashamed to expose to public view, and which they studiously conceal from sight, the reason of which perhaps is, because by those members the original corruption of human nature has been from the beginning, and still is propagated from parents to children. The leaves of the fig tree were pitched upon because of the largeness of them. The leaves of the common fig tree are very large, as everyone knows, and perhaps those in the eastern countries, and especially in Paradise, were much larger than ours. Pliny says of the fig tree, that its leaf is the largest, and the most shady. Some think the Indian fig tree is meant, so John Temporarius, as Drusius relates, and so are Milton, and according to Pliny, the breadth of the leaves of this tree has the shape of an Amazonian shield. And when they are said to sew these together, it is not to be supposed that they sewed them as tailors sew their garments together, since they cannot be thought to be furnished with proper instruments, or that they tacked them together with some sort of thorns, or made use of them instead of needles, but they took the tender branches of the fig tree with leaves on them, as the word signifies, see Nehemiah 8 verse 15, and twisted them round their waists, which served for girdles, as some render the word, and the broad leaves hanging down served for aprons, but these, whatever covering they may be thought to have been to their bodies, which yet seem to be but a slender one, they could be none to their souls, or be of any service to hide their sin and shame from the all-seeing eye of God, and of as little use are the poor and mean services of men, or their best works of righteousness, to shelter them from the wrath of God, and the vengeance of divine justice.